Okay, let's talk about rounding, and we're going to focus on significant figures. So here's our outline. We're going to explain significant figures. We're going to talk about the rules for rounding to significant figures, and then finally we will apply these rules to round significant figures in the examples that we have. Now let's go ahead and introduce the concept of significant figures. So to identify significant figures, we're going to count from the left to the right, but we have to pay attention to this detail. We must always start counting from the first non-zero digit. What that simply means is that if you have a number that starts with a bunch of zeros, you have to ignore all the zeros until you get to the first number that is not a zero. And then we will start counting from that until we get to the end of the number. Also, you only want to exclude zeros that are at the beginning. So that means we only want to ignore the zeros at the beginning. If there's a zero in the middle or at the end of the number, you have to count it in your significant figures. So let's look at this example. How many significant figures are there in 64820? So like I said earlier, we're going to start from the left and count all the way to the right. So let's look at our first digit. It's a 6, it's not a 0, so we count it. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this tells us that we have 5 significant figures. 5 significant figures. So now let's talk about the rules for rounding to significant figures. We want to first start by identifying the position of the last digit. And once we look at examples, you'll understand what all of this stuff means. Then once we identify the last digit, we're going to look to the right of the last digit. And why do we need to do this? Because it helps us decide what we're going to do with that last digit. Are we going to increase it by 1 unit? Or are we going to keep it the same? If the digit to the right is 5 or more, we have to increase the last digit by 1, which we also call rounding up. But if the digit is less than 5, we have to leave the digit alone. Now here's an important point to make. For all digits before the decimal, we must replace the digits after the last digit with zeros. So let's go ahead. This may sound all confusing and a bunch of words. So let's go ahead and try to apply these rules to some real numbers, and we'll see how this works. So we want to round 0.0009847 to 3 significant figures. So I'm going to write out the number 0.0009847. So you remember what we said earlier, you want to identify your significant figures, you must ignore all the zeros that start the number. So we're going to look for the first number that is not a 0, and that is going to be 9. So this is our first number here, and we're looking for the last digit. The last digit is 4 because we want to round to 3 significant figures. So we have 1, 2, 3. Now, what is our rule? Our rule says that we're going to look at the digit to the right over here, and we can see, because that digit, we can call it the deciding digit because it helps us determine whether we're going to increase 4 to 5 or we're going to leave 4 the way it is. And how do we know what to do? We have to check whether it is 5 or more. So this is 7, which is 5 or more, which simply means that we're going to add 1 to 4 and we're going to round up and make that 5. So we're going to now have 0.000985, and we can call this 3 significant figures. 3 significant figures. Now let's go ahead and try another example. The next one here, we have round 347.52 to 3 significant figures. So we have 347.52. So let's go ahead and look. Let me first start by writing the number 347.52 to 3 significant figures. So our first number is non-zero. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we want to round to 3 significant figures. So 3, this position is going to be the position of our last digit. So we're going to look to the right. Is this 5 or more? Yes. So we're going to simply increase 7 to 8. So we're going to have 3, 4, 8. So 347.52 to 3 significant figures is going to be 348. And I can just write it here, 3SF, if you don't want to spell it out. Let's go for another example. Round 408.603 to 2 significant figures. 408.603. And now we are going to start with 4 because it's a non-zero number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we want to round to 2 significant figures. So this is going to be the position we're interested in. And then we're going to look to the right. Oh boy, we have a number that is 5 or more. So that means we're going to increase the 0 to 1. So we have 4, 1. But here's the deal. Here's something you need to realize. The number in 2 significant figures cannot be less than the number that you have. So what I mean by that is you cannot have that many fewer digits than the number you started off with. Remember we said earlier that when you have the digits before the decimal, once you have converted to 2 significant figures, or when you have converted to the number of desired significant figures, you are now going to replace all the other digits after the last position with a 0. So we're going to do that exactly right here. So that means 408.603 is going to end up becoming 410. And this is 2 significant figures. And then our final example, round 68.2553 to 3 significant figures. So we have 68.2553. So let's count the significant figures. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to pay attention to the last position, which is the 5th position, and we have a number 5 right in that position. Let's look to the right. We have a 3. Remember that the number or the digit to the right of the last position is what we call our deciding digit. It tells us whether the number or the digit in the last position is going to be rounded up or is going to stay the same. So here we have a number less than 5. So that simply tells us that the number 5, which is our last digit here, is going to stay exactly the same. So this is going to be 68.255, and this is going to be 5 significant figures. So something that I think we can also try here is, what if I had a number like this, 743218, and we want to round this to 2 significant figures. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at our numbers. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 significant figures in the original number given. And we want to round to 2 significant figures. So I am going to look at this. This is the position that we'll consider our last digit. So now we're going to look to the right, and we can see here that we have a 3. So that means we cannot increase 4. We have to leave it exactly the way it is. But here is where things get interesting. So it becomes 7, 4. And because there's no decimal here, every position after the last position is going to be, the digit there is going to be replaced with zeros. So we're going to have 0, 0, 0, 0. So we now have 740,000, and this is going to be our 2 significant figures. So let's just recap this. When we are trying to round to significant figures, we want to first find the position of the last digit, and then we're going to look at the digit to the right of the last digit because that digit becomes a deciding digit. And what kind of decisions does it lead us to? If the digit is 5 or more, we're going to increase the last digit by 1, which we call rounding up. If the digit is less than 5, then we're going to leave the last digit alone. And important note, which is step 5, for all the digits before the decimal, we're going to replace the digit after the last digit with zeros.